and Christ on the cross is pretty much everywhere in Christianity. And so my question to you is how, like, don't get me like, I love Christ. The way I see it is that Christ is love. That's the way I see it. But I do not understand how his death on the cross was a redemption to me or anyone else. I've heard people say that. Obviously, everyone says that Christ died on the cross for you, and but I don't think I've ever heard it explained in a way that makes sense to me. So that's why I'm calling in.
That's a great question. So my reply would be that the the death on the cross can't be understood apart from Adam's fall. So Adam's fall is basically, in the Orthodox view, much more traumatic and significant than a lot of like Protestant views or even the Catholic view of the fall. We believe that because Adam was situated as the steward of the universe under God, he was intended to be basically prophet, priest, and king over the entire material universe and cosmos, and spiritual world as well. When Adam fell, this resulted in an introduction into the entire cosmos, the whole universe, every notion of corruption, decay, decomposition, death, etc. So all of that occurred as a result of that. So in other words, all of the universe was affected, as well as man's own nature and being. So when Adam fell, what he was doing was compacting himself or covenanting himself with a fallen entity who had already fallen before him. In our view, Satan had already fallen. And so when man's tempted, man is saying, okay, I'm going to not go with God and the divine laws that he's laid down. I'm going to align myself with this fallen angelic entity, Satan. What that did then was make man part and party to Satan's kingdom. Satan's kingdom is, in our view, an actual realm. It's an actual spiritual reality that Scripture goes on to call Hades and death. So it's a kingdom of death. It's a kingdom populated by other fallen entities. And so man became subservient now to these demonic entities and forces. This is, in our view, why throughout the Old Testament we see the nations committed to idolatry. They're basically, in one form or another, worshiping the many fallen entities or deities that are part and party to this fallen angelic host. When man dies, he's now in an unnatural state of having his soul severed from his body. For us, death is not natural. Death is part of the power that Satan has over those in his kingdom. He holds them in death. So it's sort of like a binding imprisonment that occurs where the souls of those who are in that kingdom are in the kingdom of Hades. So it's not like there's just the lake of fire or something. There's actually a kingdom of Hades that everybody who dies has their soul, their severed soul, go to, so to speak. Christ adopting our nature is the redemption of our whole nature, meaning all human beings that ever came. So you'll notice in Orthodox iconography, it's not mainly focused on Christ on the cross. There's a rhythm which has Christ on the cross and then Christ going into Hades. It's a famous icon known as the harrowing of Hades. This is Jesus when he dies, when his body's in the tomb. The divine person of the Son descends into Hades in that human soul, which is, again, this kingdom of Satan. Satan unknowingly invited the Son of God into his kingdom, and thereby the Son of God, as Peter says in 1 Peter 3, preached to the spirits in prison. He broke and destroyed the gates of Hades and the power of death, which Satan had over man's nature, his human nature, and then ascended to restore that human nature to what it was intended to be in the garden. And so for us, every action of Christ, from his incarnation to his ministry, to his death, burial, and resurrection, to his ascension, they're all part of the same sort of redemptive story, which is the restoration of our nature, not just to be healed, but to then be deified, to become sons of God, to participate in that resurrected life of Christ. So for us, that's what theosis is. That's the purpose of Christ coming, to destroy the power that Satan had over our fallen human nature, which is exercised, St. Maximus says, through the vices. The demons controlled our nature through the vices that enslaved us and entrapped us to be part and parcel to that that life of death that Satan has, right? So that's why Paul says in Colossians that when Christ died, that death was the undoing of all of the demonic powers, principalities, thrones, and dominions, which had sway over man's nature. So now in the Orthodox Church, our view is that in the liturgy, through the Eucharist, we are participating in the deified, transfigured flesh of Christ, who is now in the heavenly heavens, right, in the third temple, which is the heaven of heavens, in God's presence, in our nature. So it's so crucial that Christ be there in our nature as the new Adam, prophet, priest, and king of the universe. Thus, when we partake of that, partake of his new restored deified humanity, we are now sons of God, which is what the original intention was. So that's the long and short of it in terms of the whole history of redemptive theology in the Orthodox view.